Welcome back. Right. Section 3, Vibhuti Pada, Sutra 7. Trayam antarangam purvabhya. Trayam antarangam purvabhya. The three taken together, inner, internal, in relation to the preceding ones. The three are internal in relation to the preceding ones. The three mental processes of Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi constitute yoga proper, and the 5 preceding angas may be considered as merely preparatory. The whole process of Samyama takes place in the realm of the mind, and no part of the visible man is involved in it. That is why it is called antarangam. This should not, however, be considered to mean that the first 5 angas, which are external in relation to the last 3, are in any way not quite essential. In fact, without the preparatory work involved in the former, it is impossible to undertake the more subtle and difficult task involved in the latter. At least the essential conditions, which it is the object of the first 5 angas to bring about, must be produced, though not necessarily by exactly the same means. They may be brought about by other yogic practices or by Ishvara Pranadhana, as pointed out in Section 1, Sutra 23. Sutra 8. Tadapi bahir angam nirbijasya. Tadapi bahir angam nirbijasya. That too, external to the seedless samadhi. Even that, sabija samadhi, is external to the seedless nirbija samadhi. The subject of nirbija samadhi has already been dealt with in connection with Section 1, Sutra 51. Various other matters connected with nirbija samadhi will also be discussed in Section 4. This sutra has been introduced here only to emphasize the distinction between sabija and nirbija samadhi, and to bring home to the student that nirbija samadhi is a more advanced stage on the path of self-realization than sabija samadhi is. Sabija samadhi is concerned with knowledge and powers exercised within the realm of prakriti on the side of the gate which leads to kaivalya. Nirbija samadhi, on the other hand, aims at transcending the realm of prakriti and living in the state of enlightenment implied in kaivalya. The latter, therefore, is naturally internal in relation to the former. The Purusha has first to conquer all the realms of prakriti through sabija samadhi, meditating on a seed, right? And then, after conquering these realms, to gain complete self-realization, which makes him not only the lord of those realms, but also independent of them. Sutra 9. So there's 50 some odd sutras in Section 3, but the expositions on them are quite short. So we're going to be doing lots in each video. Okay. Ooh, I've never seen some of these words. Sutra 9. Vayutana nirodha samskarayor abhibhava pradurbhavo nirodha ksana chitan vayo nirodha-parinama. Let me try again. Vayutana nirodha samskarayor abhibhava pradurbhavo nirodha ksana chitan vayo nirodha-parinama. Outgoing, that which is to disappear. Incoming, that which is opposing the outgoing impression. Of the impressions, suppression, becoming latent, appearance, the unmodified state of the mind at the moment of suppression, mind, permeation, pervasion, suppression, transformation. Nirodha-parinama is that transformation of the mind in which it becomes progressively permeated by that condition of nirodha which intervenes momentarily between an impression which is disappearing and the impression which is taking its place. The space between. After dealing with the 3 stages of meditation leading up to Samadhi, Patanjali takes up the question of the 3 fundamental types of mental transformations which are involved in the practice of higher yoga. These 4 sutras, 9 through 12 in this section, bearing on this question are very important because they throw light on the essential nature of the mental processes which are involved in the practice of yoga and further elucidate the technique of Samadhi. The important point to note with regard to these 3 parinamas is that they are not states, but modes of transformation. Or to put it in other words, they do not represent static, but dynamic conditions. In the progressive process of self-realization through Samadhi, the mind can pass from one stage to another through the use of 3 and only 3 kinds of transformations, which are sequentially related to one another and really constitute 3 integral parts of a larger composite process which has to be repeated on each plane as consciousness withdraws step by step toward the center of reality. The ordinary transformations of the mind take place according to the laws of association or reasoning or according to the stimuli applied by the external world through the sense organs. The 3 kinds of transformations we are now considering are of a special kind and are used only in the practice of higher yoga after the yogi has acquired the capacity of passing into the Samadhi state at will. The sutra under discussion defines nirodha-parinama, or transformation, which results in suppression of chitta-vrittis. In view of the fact that yoga is described in section 1, sutra 2, as the suppression of chitta-vrittis, it is easy to see how important it is to understand this sutra thoroughly. As soon as control of the mind is begun, nirodha comes into play. The word nirodha in Sanskrit means both restraint and suppression, and the earlier efforts at control of the mind, beginning with Dharana, involve nirodha not so much in the sense of suppression as that of restraint. But a little careful thought will show that even in the preliminary practice of Dharana, nirodha, in the sense of suppression, is involved to a certain extent. In trying to practice Dharana, the will is trying all the time to suppress distractions and substituting in their place the one object on which meditation is to be performed. It will be obvious to anyone that in each of these efforts to replace a distraction by the chosen object, there must be a momentary state in which neither the distraction nor the chosen object is present, and the mind is really without any pratyaya. Just as when the direction of a moving object is suddenly reversed, there must be a moment when the object is not moving, but is at rest. It is because nirodha, in the limited sense, enters the problem of controlling the mind from the very beginning that Patanjali has taken up nirodha-parinama first in his treatment of the subject, but it should be noted that true nirodha, or complete suppression, is the last in the cycle of transformations and comes after samadhi-parinama and ekagrata-parinama in actual practice. We have seen that nirodha is that momentary unmodified state of the mind which intervenes when one impression, which holds the field of consciousness, is replaced by another impression. The impression which holds the field of consciousness is called Vayutana samskara, and the impression which opposes or tries to replace the Vayutara samskara is called nirodha samskara in this sutra. Between two successive impressions, there must be a momentary state in which the mind has no impression at all, or is present in an unmodified condition. The object of nirodha-parinama is to produce at will this momentary state and gradually extend it, so that the mind can exist for a considerable duration in this unmodified state. This extension of the nirodha state by repeated efforts has been expressed by the phrase nirodha ksana chittanvaya, which means permeation of the mind by the momentary state of nirodha, or complete suppression of vrittis. Nirodha-parinama comprises the whole process, beginning with the first effort at suppression of the seed, and ending with the firm establishment of the nirodha state. The yogi should be able to maintain the nirodha state for a sufficiently long time to enable consciousness to pass through the cloud or void and emerge into the next plane. In passing from a condition in which the seed of samadhi holds the field of consciousness to a condition of complete nirodha, there is a struggle between two opposite tendencies. The tendency of the seed to rise again in the field of consciousness, and the tendency of the mind to remain in a condition of nirodha. No other distraction can rise and occupy the field of consciousness because that tendency has already been eliminated in the previous two processes of samadhi parinama and ekagrata parinama. Samadhi parinama has eliminated the tendency of distractions to appear in the field of consciousness, and ekagrata parinama has established the tendency of the same impression, the seed, to persist without interruption. That is why, when the force of will is applied to suppress the seed, it is only that particular seed which can appear again. This will also show why the samadhi and ekagrata states must be attained before the will can be applied to produce their nirodha state. If these techniques have not been mastered, then after every effort of suppression, a new pratyaya or distraction may arise, as happens in the case of the ordinary man who tries to practice nirodha. The student will also be able to understand now the significance of the phrase abhyasa purva in section 1, Sutra 18, for asamprajnata samadhi is nothing but the state of the mind in which the pratyaya or seed has been made to disappear by the practice of nirodha. This condition of nirodha is not a state of ordinary mental vacuum, but a state of samadhi in which the yogi is in complete control of the mind. The first effort to suppress the seed of saprajnata samadhi produces a void only momentarily. The tendency of the seed to emerge again into consciousness is so strong, owing to the previous practice of ekagrata, that it again takes possession of the mind and transforms it into its own image. The repetition of the effort at suppression, however, makes it slightly easier every time to bring about the nirodha state and maintain the mind in that state a little longer. Continued practice of this kind gradually increases the tendency of the mind to remain in the nirodha state and weakens the tendency of the seed to reappear in the field of consciousness, as pointed out in the next sutra. A simple physical experiment will serve perhaps to illustrate the opposition of the two tendencies referred to above. OB is a rod attached to a stand OA and kept in the position OB by a spring at C. If a child is asked to press the rod OB to the position OA, he may be able to bring it to that position with difficulty and may be able to touch the stand OA only momentarily in the first attempt. Each successive attempt will, however, make it easier for him to bring the rod to the position OA and keep it in that position longer. And with sufficient practice, the child may learn to keep the rod in the position OA as long as he likes. The tendency of the rod to spring upwards has been completely mastered by the practice. In the same way, the tendency of the seed to spring back into the field of consciousness can be mastered by sufficient practice and the nirodha state maintained for a sufficient length of time for the consciousness to pass through the laya center and emerge into the next higher plane. Okay, so 9, 10, 11, and 12 kind of go together, but I tacked that onto the last two, 7 and 8. So we're going to stop there for now and continue. The next one is Tasya Prashanta Vahita Samskarat. Its flow becomes tranquil by repeated impressions. Nice. I'll continue.